getting back to the LSU football conversation as we have Wilson Alexander of The Advocate joining us to talk about the Tigers and this past weekend, as well as some of the moves that were made. Wilson, thank you for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning, y'all. How you doing?
Doing good. We're doing good. We appreciate your time joining us this morning. Some news yesterday for LSU that we'll start with just to, open it up as they hire Eric Held as their director of high school relations, and they also bring in Jay Shadari from Ole Miss as the associate director of player personnel. Can you just let everybody know kind of what those moves entail, who kind of the background of those people, and kind of what that means for LSU?
Yeah, so we'll start with Jay. I mean, he is somebody who was with Austin Thomas, hired him at Ole Miss a few years ago. Okay. And so now they're bringing him, down to LSU as the associate director of player personnel. He'll work on that sort of front office staff, is basically what it is now. And what's interesting, they're kind of like almost getting the band back together because, Austin, Preston Tiffany, who's LSU's director of player personnel, and Jai all were together at Ole Miss. So, just sort of somebody who knows Austin's system. He'll be, really involved in advanced scouting and kind of as an NFL liaison. And so, that's one addition to the staff here. And then with Eric, he kind of basically, I think, replaces what Nick Brosette was doing as the sort of high school relations there. And it makes a lot of sense that, to hire Eric for that role because he was the director of the Louisiana High School Coaches Association for the LHSAA. And so his ties throughout the state are deep and numerous. I mean, he knows he's been working with high school coaches throughout the state for a while now. And so, two additions to the staff. LSU's kind of made a fair number of off-field staff changes this year, and those are sort of the latest two additions.
Yeah, and on the discussion of Jay Shadari as they grow that player personnel general manager type room from that standpoint, the Nico conversation is one that I want to get your thoughts on with just kind of this NIL world as, the first official, public holdout by a player ahead of, during spring practices. Just kind of your thoughts on that situation and what these moves by LSU mean in this new day and age.
I guess for what they mean for LSU, with Jay, I mean, it's just adding to the, sort of to the front office, to the player personnel department. And I don't know that that's like really even in, I guess it's sort of emblematic of where we are in college football, that you would want to continue to strengthen your front office and sort of your player personnel staff. Because now they've got, Preston, Jay, and Carl St. Cyr, who's been at LSU now for a while, kind of all in that group, and all sort of working underneath Austin. And so, I guess that I don't know that that's necessarily like a direct correlation with where we are in college football, but it is, I guess, maybe somewhat of a reflection of where we are in terms of wanting to have more people involved in that. And then with Nico, I mean, it's pretty it's just pretty surprising, that you would it's interesting that, he tried to make a leverage play, or maybe his camp tried to make a leverage play, and Tennessee didn't bite. And, so now Tennessee's in a fascinating spot because, they got to go get a quarterback out of the portal. Josh Heupel already said that they would. They only have 2 on the roster. And so, who are they going to get? Because that's going to be the most attractive destination. But also with Nico, it just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to the timing of it. Who's going to give you, you're asking for $4 million according to ESPN. Who's going to come out and give you that when you threw 19 touchdowns last year, and now you, as a quarterback, have handled a situation this way? It's like, can you really get whatever team you're next to the promised land? What kind of leader are you if this is kind of how this is going to go? Right. And so, it's fascinating that it played out the way it did. It probably won't be the last time that something like that happens.
LSU had their spring scrimmage, open practice, spring game, whatever you want to call it, on Saturday.
Autograph signing.
Yeah, autograph signing, picture day.
Picture day.
Yeah.
You were there. You were in attendance. What were some of your key takeaways from that on Saturday?
The edge rushers were the first thing that stood out to me. Those guys looked good. They were disruptive. And it was good to see sort of that because LSU brought in, those 3 transfers here in the offseason, and 2 of them really popped with Jamari Butler and Jack Pyburn making a bunch of plays. Pyburn had a sack on the last play of the scrimmage, again, part of the practice, and or at least would have. Garrett Nussmeier was like, I could have gotten out of it. I don't know. But the then Relaford too, was a big part of that. We haven't really seen much out of Patrick Payton, but it's spring practice, so is what it is. Those other 3, really impressed. And then it's just, it seems like we're still just a long way off from figuring out the offensive line. And then Brian Kelly said that they really wouldn't do so until probably midway through camp in August. So it's like, okay, well, at least now it's like that. There's a timeline that everybody can try to follow and see, like, okay, by practice 8 in August, let's start to really look up and see if that thing is settled. Those are probably the 2 things that stood out to me the most. But there's a lot of other individual plays too. Barian Brown looked really good. I've been high on him all offseason. I think he's going to have a great year. So the punter, Grant Chadwick, it's a little thing that you may not think about as much, but I think he could make a difference too after what LSU's punting was last year. So those are some of the things that stood out, but I'm sure we can get into more of it.
Whenever you say that, obviously the defensive line popped, and that's been like the sentiment around after the game. Can I play devil's advocate? Like, was it more the defensive line being good, or do you have a problem on the offensive line?
I think that is a legitimate concern as well. I mean, because your offensive tackles that we've seen here throughout the spring, the only 2 who have been getting first-team reps from what we've been able to see have been Tyree Adams and Weston Davis. And we know these are both going to be first-time starters if they do win the job. And, Tyree's got a little bit more experience just because he's older. We saw him go through the bowl game, and he did okay. So I think it's maybe more of a question of, is Weston ready to step in? Talking to some people around the program earlier this spring, they said he'd been kind of inconsistent, which they sort of expected because he's a redshirt freshman. I don't know. I'm wondering if LSU might want to go after an offensive tackle in the portal in the second time around here in the spring, just because, do you want to make sure that you have done your due diligence to that position, but also then are you like who's going to be the right fit to come in and do that? Is kind of tough to sort through. I mean, Josh Thompson could maybe end up playing there if Weston doesn't sort of show up and be that guy. But yeah, I think that could be part of that concern, because that's always what you see in the offseason is, well, one position looked great, but does that mean the other one isn't any good or something like that? And so I think that could be a cause for concern, but sort of too early to know for sure. And I guess maybe if LSU thinks that it is, we'll see them probably try to do something in the portal. I think that's probably how we'll know whether or not they think it is if they go after, it's an offensive tackle here in the portal. But I don't, we'll see who's available. But it's going to be costly, as we know, in the spring.
Another position group, the defensive backfield. As much of the conversation has been about that front for the LSU defense, but there are a lot of new faces in the cornerback position, the safety position, all the above. What were kind of your takeaways from that group on Saturday?
Well, it certainly seems like Mansour Delane is going to be a starter. And, right now it looks like at cornerback. That feels like somebody you can pencil into the lineup. That other cornerback spot seems still completely wide open. I mean, PJ Woodland got a ton of playing time there on Saturday and made that great diving interception in 7-on-7. Michael Turner seems like he's put himself in the mix as part of the 2 deep. I don't think that he'll be a starter, but as somebody who could is continuing to develop and show what he can do, because he got a lot of playing time with the 2s. Obviously, we know DJ Pickett is in that mix, but again, he was mostly with the backups on Saturday. We didn't see anything out of Jakeem Jackson on Saturday. He was dressed out, but I don't think he practiced. And so he's somebody who's been getting a lot of reps with the first team. And then Ashton Stamps continues to get reps with the first team. So it just feels like there's a competition opposite of Mansour that he's probably going to be a starter, unless LSU then wants him to play something else, be the nickel or maybe even a safety or something. But right now it seems like he is heading in that direction. And then at safety play, I mean, Cooley's been out there a bunch. I would expect him to probably be a starter. And then Toviano is the other one who got a lot of work with the first team defense there on Saturday. So it seems like he's made a move toward maybe trying to get a starting spot. But we also know that that's going to be a competition that has to take place in August, because Jordan Gilbert hasn't been out there in the spring. So it's also really hard to know if the safety play is better or not. And that's really what matters is, okay, who's going to start, but is it any better? And it's hard to know in the spring. The coaches, talking to them, say they've seen better tackling, better pursuit angles. We'll have to see in August, and have to see in September to see if that really plays out. Another position where I'll be curious to see if LSU tries to go after and get another safety in the portal window.
Yeah, last one on Saturday. The LSU offense, the first-team offense, did not move the ball particularly well. Some of those issues, obviously, because of the offensive line and those edge rushers. Were there any other things that kind of concerned you watching the first-team offense on Saturday?
Yeah, it was concerning to me a little bit just because, you would expect maybe with a returning starting quarterback this thing to be clicking more.
Right.
But it also seemed like the timing was just off on some things, and it was just out of sync. I mean, even 7-on-7, where you didn't have the edge rusher pressure, maybe it was that the corners and such were doing a good job of coverage, but also, the receivers weren't necessarily getting open, and Garrett was kind of double clutching and maybe not sort of hitting his drop at the right time and releasing. It feels like maybe we've got all these new wide receivers here. That timing just needs to continue to get worked on in the offseason is probably what my takeaway would be from that, because we know that there's talent. We've seen that from Garrett, from the wide receiver position, even in glimpses from what they added here in the offseason with Barry and Brown and Nick Anderson, even though we haven't seen as much out of Nick Anderson in the spring. So it's like, okay, these guys are talented. They just all need to get on the same page. And it feels like if they can do that, then the offense will probably be okay, as long as the offensive line can provide enough time. It just felt like everything was out of sync, and maybe that's just a one-day, one-off type deal. But it was a little bit of a okay, you clearly got a lot of work to do here between now and the Clemson game.
And then Brian Kelly commented after the spring practice talking about potentially having a local, another Louisiana school coming in and doing kind of a joint practice. In your opinion, how likely is that to actually come to fruition over the next couple of off seasons?
Over the next couple of off seasons, I mean, maybe it's possible. If it's going to happen next year, well, obviously the NCAA rules would have to change anyway.
Yeah.
Is that going to happen within a year? I don't know. If the NCAA rules change, then we could actually, see it happen. It's just a matter of whether or not another school is interested in doing that too. I would have to think that somebody would be at least willing to consider it. But if LSU already is open to the idea, then that's certainly a big piece of it. And so, on a scale of 1 to 10, let's put it at a 5 within the next 3 to 5 years. Because if you have interest from the LSU side, then it certainly helps a lot. You just got to get one other school to want to do it, and I feel like there would be interest if the NCAA rules change.
Yeah, I mean, it would make our job easier because then we wouldn't have to figure out if the edge rushers look good or the offensive line looks bad.
Yeah, it'd be helpful for everybody. I mean, you get a better sense of your team if they're going up against somebody else. So for the coaches, I would think that you would like it. Obviously, the one thing that there would be some injury concern.
Right.
But you're going to have injury concern in the course of a normal practice anyway. So I feel like it's something that could be beneficial to replace this spring event game autograph signing with another team, and then do the autograph signing afterward anyway.
Yeah. What were you? If they were able to do that, would the spring portal window, that kind of conversation come back up of why would we go practice against LSU if we're a smaller school and let them get a look at some of our talent?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think that maybe something that would have to happen is some changes to the portal window, which are already kind of being discussed. I mean, Brian Kelly talked about that with me earlier in the year, and it's something that college coaches have been discussing, is trying to push for a change to the recruiting calendar as a whole, the college football calendar as a whole, because it's not working very well. And so one of the things the coaches want to do, at least according to Brian Kelly, is just have one portal window. And this came out of the AFCA convention in January. One portal window at some point kind of in the spring instead of what they've got going on in December. Or maybe you have the one kind of in December and you don't have it in the spring, but basically just at least reducing that. I don't know that they're going to be able to put the genie back in the bottle. Is the NCAA going to be able to kind of come down with that rule and then not instantly get hit with litigation? That might depend on the results of the House settlement. So there's a lot of sort of questions and lead off, things that could trigger something else. We'll see. Because I mean, those are all things that kind of have to play out down the road. And the other thing would be, what was I going to say? Oh, one of the things that Kelly was maybe wanting to see instead of maybe even just spring practice was NFL-style OTAs. And I guess you wouldn't really do joint ones of those with another team. And that would also maybe even be a little bit more in the summer than here, right in the middle of the spring. And so there's a lot of kind of just things up in the air, and a lot of things would probably have to happen to get to that point where they actually do have joint practices. There would certainly be a lot of considerations made there, but I still feel like it's something that if the rules allowed for it, and if we're kind of in the same structure that we're in now with spring practice, instead of having like summer OTAs, then we could see a joint practice at some point.
Well, we appreciate your time this morning, joining us and all the insight, of course. And we'll talk soon. Have a great day.
Y'all too. I guess we didn't have time for the game today.
Oh, I didn't know if you wanted to do it or not. I didn't know if you were scared, Wilson. Yeah, we can pull it up real quick.
Actually, that would probably take way too much time because y'all